The humid air of central Florida hangs heavy over the brick gates of Cassadaga, a place where the living seek the dead. Deep within the cemetery grounds sits a throne of weathered stone and mortar. Known to the locals as the Devil's Chair, it is a monument of cold dread, where the silence of the night is said to carry the weight of a physical presence. At the stroke of midnight, the atmosphere around this particular bench shifts into something unrecognizable and hostile. Legion are the stories of those who attempted to sit upon its surface, only to flee before the sun could ever rise. The chair is not merely an object, it is a gateway to a darkness that the town of psychics prefers to leave undisturbed. Founded in the late 19th century, Cassadaga has long been a sanctuary for those who believe in the afterlife. Yet while the spiritualists speak of light and healing, the cemetery at the edge of town whispers of a different force. The Devil's Chair was intended as a place for the grieving to rest, but it has become a focal point for the unexplained. Witnesses describe a sensation of being watched by 1,000 eyes the moment they cross the threshold of the graveyard. The temperature around the brick structure is known to plummet, even during the sweltering heat of a Florida summer. It is a localized chill that seems to originate from the very heart of the chair, radiating outward like a warning. There is a specific weight to the air here, a pressure that builds in the chest of anyone who dares to linger too long. Many report the sudden onset of nausea and a primal urge to run, a fight or flight response triggered by nothing visible. It is the feeling of being an intruder in a space that has long since been claimed by an ancient, territorial entity. The legend of the beer can is perhaps the most famous, yet the most disturbing evidence of the chair's strange physics. Visitors often leave an unopened can of beer on the seat as an offering to the spirit that resides within the bricks. By morning, the can is frequently found exactly where it was left, completely empty of its liquid contents. The aluminum remains cold to the touch, and the seal of the tab is never broken, leaving no logical path for the liquid. It is as if the matter itself was phased out of existence, consumed by a hunger that does not belong to the physical world. Skeptics have tried to debunk this for decades, yet the phenomenon persists, documented by those who return at dawn. Physical aggression is another hallmark of the encounters reported by those who have dared to occupy the throne. One local investigator recalled feeling a sharp burning sensation on his neck while attempting to record audio at the site. When he reached the safety of his vehicle, he found 3 distinct, angry welts that looked like claw marks. He had been alone in the clearing, with no low-hanging branches or animals nearby that could have caused such trauma. The marks lasted for weeks, a permanent reminder of the night he tried to challenge the silence of Cassadaga. This is a recurring theme among survivors. The chair does not just scare its guests, it leaves a physical mark upon them. In the 1960s, a group of teenagers from Daytona decided to test their courage by spending the entire night on the bench. They arrived with flashlights and a sense of youthful bravado, convinced that the stories were nothing more than local myth. By 2 a.m., the bravado had vanished, replaced by a collective, paralyzing fear that they could not put into words. They described hearing a sound like heavy boots crunching on the dry grass, circling them in a tight, rhythmic pattern. Every time they turned their lights toward the noise, the sound would stop instantly, only to resume behind their backs. It was a psychological game of cat and mouse played by a predator that refused to show its face to the light. One of the boys claimed he felt a hand, cold as ice, rest briefly on his shoulder before pushing him forward. The force was enough to knock him off his feet, sending him sprawling into the dirt in front of the Devil's Chair. The group fled immediately, leaving behind their equipment and their dignity as they scrambled over the cemetery walls. The police stopped to think that the videos you just watched, with flawless scripts and engaging narrations, might have been created by someone who never even touched a camera or a microphone? There is a new digital elite profiting heavily behind the scenes of YouTube and social media, building massive channels without ever showing their faces or spending thousands of dollars on equipment. While most people are frozen by the fear of being on camera, these individuals are using the hidden power of artificial intelligence to generate automated content that works and earns for them 24 hours a day. The secret to dominating this game isn't about having a famous face. It's about knowing how to command the right tools to create scripts, voices, and visuals that magnetically hold the audience's attention. I've gained access to a strategic method that reveals the exact roadmap for you to build your own invisible digital empire. Mastering AI to turn clicks into a real source of income, it is the perfect opportunity for those seeking financial and geographical freedom without having to deal with the pressure of being a public figure on the internet. Best of all, you can seize this opportunity right now for a symbolic price. The complete training is under an exclusive promotion, dropping from $97 to just $17. This is your passport to unlocking the knowledge you need to start your professional journey with AI today. Click the first link in the description to secure your spot while this discount is still active. The police records in Volusia County contain sporadic reports of trespassing and suspicious activity at the cemetery. Officers who respond to these calls often mention a feeling of unease that lingers long after they have left the grounds. Some have even refused to walk back to the chair alone, citing a heavy atmosphere that interferes with their radios. It is a known fact that electronic devices frequently malfunction in the immediate vicinity of the brick structure. Cameras fail to focus, batteries drain from full to zero in minutes, and digital recorders capture only static. The energy of the site seems to interfere with the flow of electricity, creating a dead zone for modern technology. Some paranormal researchers suggest that the chair sits on a ley line, a natural conduit for the Earth's spiritual energy. This would explain why the psychics of Cassadaga were drawn to this specific patch of Florida wilderness so long ago. However, if the energy is neutral, the chair has somehow twisted it into something far more predatory and dark. The bricks used to build the seat are said to be reclaimed from various parts of the county, each with its own history. Some believe that the materials carry the residual energy of past tragedies, a stone tape replaying old sorrows. If this is true, the chair is a mosaic of grief, bound together by mortar and the fear of the countless visitors. There are those who claim that the entity in the chair is not a demon, but the original caretaker of the cemetery, a man who took his duties so seriously in life that he refuses to abandon his post, even a century after his death. He sits and watches the graves, ensuring that no one disturbs the peace of those resting beneath the mossy oaks. But the caretaker theory does not account for the beer cans or the physical scratches reported by many witnesses. A protector would not likely demand offerings or physically harm those who are merely curious about the local lore. There is a malevolence in the chair that suggests a consciousness far older and less human than a simple ghost. The architecture of the chair is simple, yet it possesses a strange geometry that seems to draw the eye toward it. Even in total darkness, the outline of the throne remains visible, as if it is absorbing what little light the moon provides. It stands as a silent sentinel at the edge of the path, waiting for the next person to seek its forbidden company. Local psychics often warn tourists to stay away from the cemetery after dark, citing low-frequency vibrations. They claim that the chair acts as a lighthouse for negative entities that are unable to find peace in the light. To sit in the chair is to invite these entities into your personal space, a risk that most residents are unwilling to take. One particular account from the 1980s involves a woman who claimed to have seen a tall shadow figure standing behind the chair. The figure was described as being over 7 feet tall, with no discernible facial features and long, spindly fingers. It stood perfectly still, watching her from the darkness as she approached the bench on a dare from her friends. She felt a wave of depression so intense that she began to weep uncontrollably, unable to move her legs to run. It was as if the entity was feeding on her emotions, draining her of her will to escape the shadow of the cemetery. Only when her friends called out to her did the figure vanish, leaving her shivering in the warm, humid night air. The woman never fully recovered from the experience, claiming for years that the shadow figure had followed her home. She spoke of a constant feeling of being watched from the corners of her rooms and hearing footsteps in her hallway. This attachment is a common fear among those who delve too deeply into the mysteries of the Devil's Chair. In the quiet town of Cassadaga, the residents speak of the chair in hushed tones, if they choose to speak of it at all. It is a shadow over their community, a dark counterpart to the messages of hope and healing they offer to the world. The chair represents the side of the spiritual world that cannot be controlled or predicted by human intervention. As the night deepens, the sounds of the Florida woods seem to vanish entirely when one approaches the brick throw. The crickets go silent, and the wind dies down, creating a vacuum of sound that is more terrifying than any noise. It is in this absolute silence that the true nature of the chair begins to reveal itself to the brave and the foolish. You might hear the sound of a sigh right next to your ear, or the rustle of clothing where no one is standing. The sensory deprivation of the cemetery at night heightens the awareness of every unnatural occurrence near the chair. It is a place where the subconscious mind and the external reality bleed into one another until neither is certain. Historical accounts suggest that the land was sacred to indigenous tribes long before George Colby arrived in the region. The spirits of those who died during the forced migrations or local conflicts may still linger in the soil of the cemetery. If the chair sits atop an old wound in the earth, it may be drawing its power from a source that predates the colony. Many investigators have noted that the chair feels hungry, as if it is constantly searching for a new source of energy. This hunger manifests as the drain on electronic devices and the exhaustion felt by those who spend time near it. It is an energy sink, a black hole of spiritual force that pulls everything toward its cold, brick center. By 3 a.m., often referred to as the witching hour, the activity at the Devil's Chair reaches its absolute peak. This is when the most violent reports occur, and when the feeling of dread becomes almost too much for the human heart. It is the time when the boundary between the living world and the abyss is at its most fragile and permeable. If you were to sit there now, in the pitch black of the Florida night, you would hear the oaks groaning under their own weight. You would feel the moisture in the air turn to a frost-like chill against your skin, despite the warmth of the climate. And you would realize, far too late, that the chair was never intended for a living person to occupy. Some say the chair is a focal point for a thought form, a being created by the collective belief of the thousands who visit. Every person who comes with fear in their heart leaves a piece of that emotion behind, feeding the entity. Over a century, that fear has coalesced into something with its own agenda and its own terrifying strength. The physical decay of the chair is also a point of interest for those who study the site's dark history. The mortar often appears scorched, even when there has been no fire or lightning strike in the immediate area. It is as if the heat of the entity's presence is slowly baking the materials from the inside out, year after year. Researchers have found that the soil directly beneath the chair is strangely sterile, with very little insect life present. In a state known for its swarms of ants and beetles, the absence of life in this small patch of earth is striking. Nature itself seems to have declared a no man's land around the seat, avoiding the area with instinctive caution. One local legend speaks of a man who tried to destroy the chair in the 1920s with a sledgehammer and a fueled rage. He didn't manage to leave a single scratch on the bricks, but he was found the next day wandering the road in a daze. He could not remember his name or how he got there, his mind completely wiped clean by whatever he encountered. This loss of memory or identity is a recurring side effect for those who push the chair's limits too aggressively. It is as if the entity doesn't just want to scare you, it wants to consume the very essence of who you are. The price of curiosity in the Cassadaga Cemetery is often much higher than anyone is prepared to pay. The town itself remains a mystery, a cluster of Victorian homes where mediums offer readings to the grieving and curious. But the mediums know better than to conduct their business near the chair after the sun begins its daily descent. They understand that not all spirits are looking to provide closure. Some are merely looking for a way back in. As we look closer at the photographic evidence from the site, strange patterns begin to emerge in the shadows. Figures that appear to be human but with elongated limbs and distorted features are often caught in the periphery of shots. They never appear directly in front of the lens, always hiding in the darkness just beyond the reach of the flash. The chair seems to act as an anchor for these beings, keeping them tethered to our world through the medium of the brick. Without the chair, they might drift away, but as long as it stands, they have a throne from which to rule. It is a permanent station for the forgotten and the malevolent, hidden in plain sight in a central Florida graveyard. What is the true origin of the name the Devil's Chair? No one can point to a single document or official record. It is a name that rose from the collective subconscious of the people, a title earned through decades of terror. In the absence of a better explanation, the most extreme label was the only one that seemed to fit the reality. If you ever find yourself walking the paths of Cassadaga, you will feel the pull of the chair long before you see it. It is a magnetic tug on your soul, inviting you to take a seat and rest your weary bones for a moment. But remember the stories of those who came before you and those who never truly made it back home. The path is narrow and the trees are thick with Spanish moss that looks like gray hair hanging in the dark. The ground is uneven and the headstones seem to lean toward the path as if to block your eventual exit. And there, at the end of the trail, the chair sits in a clearing of dead grass, waiting for its next occupant. The silence here is not empty. It is full of the echoes of screams that were never heard by the world outside the gate. It is full of the whispers of things that have no mouths, yet speak directly into the darkest parts of your mind. To enter this place is to acknowledge that there are things in the Florida woods that science cannot explain. We must consider the possibility that the chair is a glitch in the fabric of our reality, a place where physics breaks down. The disappearance of the liquid in the beer cans suggests a spatial anomaly that we are far from understanding. Perhaps the chair is not haunted in the traditional sense, but is instead a window into another dimension, a dimension where the rules of time and matter are different, and where the inhabitants are not bound by our laws. If this is the case, the devil is simply a visitor from a place we were never meant to perceive or visit. The chair is the bridge, and the cemetery is the toll house where the price is paid in fear and sanity. Many have tried to bless the chair with holy water or perform exorcisms to cleanse the site of its dark reputation. Each attempt has failed, often resulting in the sudden illness or misfortune of those who tried to perform the rite. The chair does not want to be cleansed. It is perfectly comfortable in its state of perpetual, cold darkness. It remains one of the most consistently active paranormal sites in the United States, despite its humble appearance. It does not need a grand mansion or a bloody history of murder to maintain its status as a place of true horror. The simple act of sitting down is all it takes to trigger a sequence of events that will haunt you forever. As we conclude this first part of our investigation, the chair remains empty, its brick surface cold under the moon. The night is far from over, and the shadows are only beginning to stretch their limbs across the graves of Cassadaga. There is more to discover about the history of this seat and the people who were forever changed by its touch. The records of the local asylum and the hidden journals of the town's founders hold clues to what lies beneath. We will delve into the documented cases of those who sat and the terrifying aftermath of their foolish curiosity. The story of the Devil's Chair is a puzzle with pieces that are stained with blood and tears. Stay with us as we move into the second half of our journey through the darkest corner of the Sunshine State. The lights are dimming and the air is growing colder as we approach the heart of the mystery once more. The chair is waiting, and the next chapter of its history is about to be written in the silence of the night. The second half of our investigation begins in the deepest hours of the night, where the true terror of the chair resides. As the moon crosses the meridian, the energy within the Cassadaga Cemetery reaches a point of absolute saturation. It is here that we find the accounts of those whose lives were shattered by a single minute spent on the brick throne. One of the most chilling cases involves a young woman who visited the site in 1994 on a dare from her co-workers. She was a skeptic, a woman of science who believed that every ghost story had a rational, earthly explanation. She sat in the chair and laughed, mocking the legends as she looked into the lens of her friend's camera. The photo taken at that exact moment shows her laughing, but behind her, a pair of pale, glowing eyes are visible. They are positioned at the height of a tall man, staring directly into the back of her head with predatory intent. The woman didn't see them at the time, but she reported feeling a sudden, agonizing jolt of electricity through her spine. She was unable to move for several seconds, her muscles locked in a state of tetany as she stared into the void. Her friends had to physically drag her from the seat, and she remained unable to speak for nearly 3 hours. When her voice finally returned, it was not her own. She spoke in a low, gravelly tongue that no one recognized. The medical professionals who examined her could find no evidence of a stroke or neurological damage to explain it. She eventually regained her normal speech, but she was never the same woman who had entered the cemetery that night. She became obsessed with the occult, eventually disappearing from her home and leaving behind only a drawing of the chair. There are also reports of time slips associated with the devil's chair, where minutes seem to pass like hours. A group of researchers once set a digital timer on the seat and moved back to the safety of the main path. When they retrieved the timer 20 minutes later, the device showed that over 6 hours of time had elapsed. The internal clock of the machine had sped up, yet the researchers had only experienced a short wait in the dark. This suggests that the chair exists in a pocket of warped space-time, where our understanding of reality is invalid. If time behaves differently there, it is no wonder that the entities who inhabit the space seem so alien to us. The physical structure of the chair itself seems to defy the natural process of erosion and environmental wear. While other brick structures in the cemetery show signs of moss and cracking, the chair remains unnaturally clean. It is as if the energy surrounding it prevents the growth of any organic matter that might attempt to claim it. One groundskeeper who worked at the cemetery for 30 years claimed he never once saw a spider web on the chair. In the heart of the Florida wilderness, where spiders are everywhere, this absence is more than just a coincidence. It is a biological rejection, a sign that the very fabric of life finds the chair to be an inhospitable and dead place. In the archives of the Volusia County Historical Society, there are mentions of the Great Unrest in the early 1900s. It was a period where many of the town's residents reported the same nightmare, a man in black sitting on a brick throne. He would point toward their homes, and within days, a member of that household would fall ill or pass away. The town elders eventually performed a secret ceremony to bind the entity to the cemetery grounds, away from the living. Whether this ceremony succeeded or simply gave the entity a permanent home is a matter of much debate among locals. What is certain is that the chair became the focal point of the town's fears from that moment forward. There are also whispers of a second chair, hidden somewhere deep in the swampy woods surrounding the town. It is said that the chair in the cemetery is merely the public face of a much larger and more dangerous network. The second chair is rumored to be where the true rituals take place, far from the eyes of tourists and skeptics. But it is the chair in the graveyard that continues to draw the most attention and claim the most victims of fear. Every October, the reports of activity spike as the season of the dead brings more visitors to the psychic capital. The entity in the chair seems to enjoy the increased attention, as if the fear of the crowd is a feast for its spirit. We must also consider the testimony of a retired police officer who patrolled the area in the late 1970s. He claimed that on several occasions he saw a black carriage pulled by 2 horses enter the cemetery gates. The carriage would stop at the devil's chair, and a figure would step out to sit upon the brick for a few minutes. When the officer would turn on his spotlight, the carriage and the horses would vanish instantly into thin air. There were no hoofprints in the dirt, and no sound of wheels on the gravel, only the ringing silence of the night. He stopped reporting these sightings after being told by his superiors that it was just the Florida heat playing tricks. But he knew what he saw, and the look of the figure in the carriage haunted him until the day he died. He described the passenger as having a face like cracked parchment, with eyes that held the vacuum of space. It was not a man, and it was not a ghost. It was something that belonged to the age before the world was bright. The cold spots around the chair have been measured by thermal imaging at temperatures as low as 30 degrees. This occurs while the surrounding air is a humid 85, creating a literal wall of ice in the middle of the dark. The transition is so sharp that you can stand with one hand in the heat and the other in the freezing pocket. This phenomenon is often accompanied by a smell that witnesses describe as old earth and sulfur. It is the smell of a deep grave being opened for the first time in a century, a scent of rotten ancient dust. When this smell appears, it is a signal that the entity is fully manifest and that the time for running has arrived. One of the most terrifying aspects of the chair is the vocal mimicry that has been reported by several witnesses. People have heard the voices of their loved ones calling to them from the direction of the chair, begging for help. One man nearly walked right into the seat because he was certain he heard his daughter crying for him in the dark. His daughter was at home, miles away, asleep in her bed. As he confirmed later that night with a trembling heart, the chair uses our own memories and our own loves against us, lure us into its reach with the sounds of the familiar. It is a sophisticated hunter, one that understands the human heart well enough to know exactly how to break it. If you look at the mortar between the bricks, you will sometimes see what looks like wet, dark stains. Chemical analysis by a private lab once suggested that these stains were composed of proteins found in human blood. The stains appear and disappear without warning, leaving no trace of how they arrived or where they went. It is as if the chair is bleeding the sorrow of the past, or perhaps it is absorbing the life of the present. Every drop of blood and every tear shed in that cemetery seems to find its way toward the brick throne eventually. It is a sponge for human suffering, a collector of the moments that we would rather forget. The psychics of Cassadaga have a name for the entity, though they rarely speak it to those outside their circle. They call it the sitter, and they believe it has been there since the first stone was laid in the Florida soil. It is not a spirit of a dead human, but an elemental force of the earth that was disturbed by the presence of the town. They say that the sitter does not hate us. It simply does not recognize our right to exist in its domain. To it, we are like insects crawling over a sleeping giant, and the chair is the giant's thumb, pressing down on us. It is a humbling and terrifying thought that we are so insignificant to the forces that truly ruled the night. As the first hint of gray begins to touch the eastern horizon, the activity at the chair begins to recede. The freezing air warms, the sulfur smell vanishes, and the heavy pressure on the chest slowly dissipates. The chair returns to being an unremarkable pile of bricks, a silent witness to the horrors of the night. But for those who have experienced the true power of the devil's chair, the daylight is merely a mask. They know that the darkness is still there, hiding in the cracks between the bricks and the shadows of the oaks. They know that the sun will set again, and the occupant will return to claim his throne once more. The mystery of the Cassadaga Cemetery is a reminder that some legends are built on a foundation of absolute truth. It is a place where the barrier between our world and the next is not just thin, it is completely broken. And in that breach sits a chair, waiting for anyone who is foolish enough to think they can handle the truth. We have explored the history, the sightings, and the physical anomalies that make this site a beacon of the paranormal. But the most important part of the story is the warning that has been passed down through generations of Floridians. Respect the dead, stay on the path, and for your own sake, never sit in the chair at midnight. The devil's chair remains a silent, brick enigma in the heart of the Sunshine State, a dark stain on a bright map. It is a story that has no ending, because as long as the chair stands, the encounters will continue. Every night is a new chapter in the history of the chair, written in the fear of those who dare to visit. We leave the cemetery now, moving back toward the light and the safety of the world we think we know. But the memory of the chair follows us, a cold shadow in the back of our minds that refuses to be forgotten. The Florida woods are full of secrets, but few are as heavy or as dark as the one in Cassadaga. Thank you for joining us on this investigative journey into the heart of one of America's most haunted locations. What do you think is the true nature of the devil's chair? Do you believe it is a spirit, a demon, or something else? Please share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. We would love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new dive into the macabre. If this story left you looking over your shoulder, please leave a like to support our work and help us grow.